If you think violence solves anything, watch this to the end. Jacob Ross, Liam McKinnon, two teenagers from Bannockburn who are now serving 6 years in prison for attempted murder after attacking a man with a hammer. Boris. T.O. began inside the High Court in Edinburgh, where the courtroom sat in silence as the judge delivered his final words. You are both 18, and you launched a brutal and senseless attack. You repeatedly struck your victim with a hammer. You punched him. You kicked him, and you jumped on him while he lay helpless on the ground. You left him bleeding, broken, and close to death. The court must treat that with the utmost seriousness. They smiled. It happened on the 23rd of February 2023. The victim, a man in his 30s, knew both boys. There had been no major issues between them before, but tension had been building. Witnesses later said it started with a disagreement, harsh words exchanged days earlier. That night, Jacob and Liam went looking for him. Whether they meant to scare him or hurt him, no one really knows. But what happened next turned from confrontation to horror. The attack was sudden and violent. The man was struck repeatedly on the head and body with a hammer. He was punched, kicked, and stomped on while lying on the ground. When the assault ended, he was barely conscious, his body covered in blood. He was rushed to hospital, suffering serious head injuries, broken ribs, and internal bleeding. He underwent surgery and spent weeks recovering. Doctors said he was lucky to survive. Police wasted no time. CCTV footage from the nearby street showed two figures running away after the attack. Both were wearing hoodies. Within a day, their identities were confirmed. Jacob Ross and Liam McKinnon. They were arrested and charged with attempted murder. During questioning, both denied the intention to kill. Jacob told officers it was just a fight that got out of control. Liam broke down, saying he didn't want any of it to happen, but the evidence was clear. The hammer, the blood, the injuries, and the witness statements. In court, the prosecution described the attack as vicious and sustained. The victim had known both attackers and had done nothing to provoke such brutality. The defense tried to paint a picture of two young men lost in a cycle of bad choices. Jacob, it was said, had been struggling with substance use and was already on bail for other offenses. Liam's lawyer spoke of his remorse, saying he had been influenced by Jacob and had since expressed deep regret for his role in the assault. But none of that could change the outcome. The judge made it clear that the gravity of the attack required a lengthy sentence. The public needed to see that such violence would not go unpunished. The two young men, barely adults, co-pa for Bannockburn. The story left a lasting scar. One man almost lost his life. Two teenagers lost their freedom. Their families lost peace. And everyone was left asking the same question. How could it come to this? This was not a planned murder. It was anger, pride, and poor judgment mixed into one catastrophic decision. But the damage was done. The court had spoken. The hammer that was once a tool became a weapon, and two young lives were now defined by a single act of violence. When news broke that two teenagers had been jailed for attempted murder, many in Bannockburn were left asking one question. How did this happen? What could drive two 18-year-olds to attack a man with a hammer? To understand, investigators had to go back to the night of the 23rd of February, 2023. The night everything began. Shortly after 11 p.m., police and ambulance crews were called to a residential street in Bannockburn. A man had been found lying on the ground, badly beaten, struggling to breathe. He had deep wounds to his head and bruising across his body. Witnesses reported hearing shouting, followed by the sound of metal hitting pavement. One woman told officers it sounded like someone swinging a hammer. Then silence. The victim was rushed to hospital in critical condition. Surgeons later confirmed he had suffered a fractured skull, multiple broken ribs, and internal bleeding. It was only through emergency surgery that his life was saved. Meanwhile, the police sealed off the scene. Detectives from Stirling CID began collecting evidence through the night. Blood samples were taken from the pavement. A dropped phone was found near the scene, and officers began combing CCTV from nearby shops and houses. Within hours, a breakthrough came. Security footage from a local shop captured two young men walking past just minutes before the assault. One of them appeared to be carrying something metallic in his right hand. Detectives enhanced the footage. The faces became clearer. Both were known locally. The names soon followed: Jacob Ross and Liam McKinnon, both 18. By morning, officers had visited their homes. Jacob Ross was arrested first. According to police reports, he appeared tense but calm. He denied everything. "I don't know what you're talking about," he told officers as he was handcuffed. Liam McKinnon was picked up a few hours later. Unlike Jacob, he seemed shaken. During questioning, he admitted being present, but claimed he didn't touch the man. He said Jacob had lost control, that it happened too fast. But the evidence painted a different picture. Forensic investigators matched traces of blood found on Jacob's clothing to the victim. A hammer recovered from a nearby field also tested positive for the same DNA. The witness who lived close to the scene confirmed seeing both teenagers running from the area seconds after the attack. Another witness recalled hearing one of them shout, "That's what you get," before fleeing. The police timeline began to form. The victim, who knew both teenagers casually, had encountered them earlier that evening. What started as a verbal argument turned violent. Detectives concluded the attack was deliberate, sustained, not a momentary outburst. The level of force combined with the repeated strikes to the head made it clear this was an attempted murder, not simple assault. As the case developed, more details emerged about the attackers. Court documents later revealed that Jacob Ross was already on bail from multiple courts at the time. He had a history of minor offenses and was known to police. Liam McKinnon, by contrast, had no serious record. Friends described him as quiet, easily influenced, and often seen following Jacob's lead. Prosecutors would later use this dynamic to explain how the pair ended up together that night. When the case reached the High Court in Edinburgh, the prosecution relied heavily on forensic evidence, witness statements. The defense did not dispute that an attack occurred, but argued that there was no intent to kill. Both defendants claimed they had been drinking and had not planned the assault. However, medical experts testified that the nature of the injuries, especially the repeated blows to the head with a hammer, showed clear intent to cause fatal harm. The judge called it an act of brutal violence with potentially deadly consequences. He described how the victim's injuries were so severe that only immediate medical intervention saved his life. Had help arrived a few minutes later, the judge said, we would be dealing with a murder case, not attempted murder. Despite their denials, the jury found both teenagers guilty. The judge acknowledged their youth and difficult upbringings, made it clear that such factors could not excuse their actions. You must now face the consequences, he told them. This court cannot ignore the seriousness of what you have done. Each was sentenced to 6 years in prison, reduced from an 11-year term due to their age, followed by a 2-year community license period after release. They were also banned from contacting the victim in any form. In a statement after the sentencing, a spokesperson for Police Scotland said, "This was a horrific and senseless attack carried out by 2 young men who showed no regard for human life. The victim suffered serious and lasting injuries. We hope today's sentence brings some measure of justice, closure to him and his family." As the case closed, the people of Bannockburn were left stunned. How could 2 teenagers from their own streets commit such violence? Some blamed peer pressure. Others pointed to substance abuse and a culture of anger that had spiraled out of control. But one truth remained: one night, one weapon, one decision, and 3 lives changed forever. When the attack ended, the man who had been beaten with a hammer was left lying in the street, unconscious and covered in blood. By the time paramedics reached him, his pulse was weak and he was barely breathing. Few expected him to survive that night, but against the odds, he did. In the days that followed, he underwent several operations at Forth Valley Royal Hospital. Surgeons repaired a fractured skull and treated severe bleeding in the brain. His ribs were broken, and his body was bruised from repeated blows. A hospital spokesperson later described his condition as critical but stable. For the next several weeks he remained in recovery, supported by family and friends who struggled to understand how something so violent could happen in their quiet town. When detectives visited him for the first time, he was still weak, speaking slowly, trying to recall the events. "I just remember them shouting," he told officers. "Then I felt the first hit. Everything after that was pain," he confirmed. He knew both attackers, Jacob Ross and Liam McKinnon, said he had never had serious issues with either of them. "We'd spoken before. Nothing bad. I don't know why they did it." His words became a key part of the prosecution's case, but beyond the courtroom, the trauma lingered. Doctors warned him his recovery would be long, both physically and mentally. He suffered regular headaches, difficulty sleeping, and anxiety whenever he went outside. Even months later, he said he could still hear the sound of the hammer striking. "It plays over and over in my head," he told a journalist. "I'm alive, but I'll never be the same." Meanwhile, as the case gained national attention, the community of Bannockburn reacted with disbelief. Locals described the area as generally quiet, not the kind of place where violent crime was common. One shop owner said, "You'd see those boys around, sometimes laughing, acting like any other teens. You'd never imagine something like this." Another resident said, "It scared everyone. The parents started worrying more about what their kids were doing at night." Community groups and youth workers soon began holding meetings and outreach programs aimed at addressing youth violence, alcohol, misuse, and peer pressure. A local counselor told reporters this tragedy shows how quickly things can spiral when anger and alcohol mix. "We can't bring back what was lost, but we can try to stop it from happening again." The attack also sparked a wider discussion about the challenges facing young people in smaller Scottish towns, the limited opportunities, rising mental health issues, and the influence of substance use. Social workers who later reviewed the case noted that both Jacob and Liam had struggled in school, had little structure in their daily lives. One report said they lacked guidance and support at key stages, but emphasized that responsibility for the crime rests entirely with their actions. For the victim, justice brought only partial comfort. He told police he didn't want revenge, he wanted accountability. When the 6-year sentence was announced, he said he accepted it, but added, "They'll get their chance to start again one day. I just hope they learn from it. I didn't deserve what happened, and I don't want anyone else to go through it." In the months after sentencing, Bannockburn slowly returned to normal, but the memory of that night remained. The street where the attack took place became a symbol of caution, a reminder of how fast anger can destroy lives. Parents spoke to their children differently. Schools invited officers to talk about consequences. And for many residents, the case became a turning point in how they viewed violence among young people. The Police Scotland spokesperson later reflected, "This case was not just about punishment. It was about prevention. 2 young men made a terrible choice, but we have to look at what drives those choices. Violence, no matter who commits it, leaves lasting damage on everyone involved." By the time the story left the headlines, 3 lives had been permanently changed. A victim, still learning to live again, and 2 teenagers, beginning their adult lives inside a prison system. The lesson from Bannockburn was clear. 1 moment of rage can destroy years of freedom, and even when the sentence ends, the consequences never truly disappear. After the brutal attack in Bannockburn, police investigators moved fast. Detectives from Police Scotland's major investigation team were called in within hours. They began by sealing off the scene, a narrow residential street not far from the town center, and started collecting forensic evidence. The area was cordoned with blue tape. Forensic officers in white suits worked under bright floodlights late into the night, photographing every bloodstain, every footprint, every dropped item. A single hammer, bent slightly from impact, was found near a hedge, about 10 feet from where the victim collapsed. Its handle had smudges of blood, defined fingerprints. That hammer would later become one of the most crucial pieces of evidence in the entire case. Witnesses soon came forward. One neighbor, a woman in her 40s, told police she heard shouting just before midnight. "It was like an argument at first," she recalled. "Then I heard a loud crack and someone screamed. When I looked out the window, I saw 2 figures running off." Another witness, a teenage boy who lived nearby, said he recognized one of them. "It looked like Jacob," he told officers. "He had that same black hoodie he always wore." But the next morning, police had names: Jacob Ross and Liam McKinnon, both just 18. They were known to local officers, not as hardened criminals, but as troubled young men who had been cautioned before minor fights and public disorder. Detectives gathered CCTV footage from nearby shops and homes. One camera positioned outside a convenience store that captured 2 young men walking quickly down the street minutes before the attack. Both wore dark clothes. In one frame, a hammer could be seen tucked into the waistband of Jacob's jeans. Later footage showed them running away, one glancing back nervously, the other shouting something indistinct. That sequence became critical in linking them directly to the crime scene. When police visited Jacob Ross's home, they found him visibly shaken. He denied everything, insisting he had nothing to do with what happened. But forensic testing told another story. The trace of the victim's blood was later found on his trainers. Liam, arrested shortly after, gave a similar denial. He told officers, "We were there, but we didn't do anything. It wasn't like that." The investigation uncovered more text messages exchanged between Jacob and Liam earlier that night, hinting at confrontation. One message from Jacob read, "If he shows up, I'll deal with him myself." Another from Liam replied, "Don't go mad, bro. It's not worth it." The prosecutors would later argue that those messages showed intent, a deliberate decision to confront and attack the victim. In court, the Crown presented the case clearly. They laid out the timeline, the argument, the walk to the scene, the hammer, and a violent assault that left the man fighting for his life. They played CCTV footage, displayed the blood-stained hammer, and read out medical reports detailing the extent of the injuries. The jury listened in silence as a detective described what he saw when he first arrived. "There was blood on the pavement and drag marks toward the gutter," he said. "The victim was barely conscious, gasping for air." When questioned, both Jacob and Liam continued to deny attempting to murder the man. Their defense argued that they had acted recklessly under the influence of alcohol, claiming they never meant to kill anyone. But the prosecution maintained the attack was sustained, deliberate, and brutal. The forensic pathologist who treated the victim testified that each strike to the head was capable of causing fatal injury. The judge later quoted that line during sentencing, saying it highlighted the severity of the crime. As the trial continued, the weight of evidence became overwhelming. The hammer, the CCTV, the blood traces, it all painted a clear picture. On the 3rd week of the trial, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict: guilty of attempted murder. Jacob Ross and Liam McKinnon showed little emotion as the verdict was read. Their families wept quietly in the gallery. The victim, who attended in person, kept his eyes down the entire time. Outside court, the lead investigator addressed reporters. "This was a vicious and senseless attack," he said. "Our thoughts remain with the victim, who showed incredible courage throughout this process. The community of Bannockburn can take comfort knowing justice has been served." Inside, however, the story was not over. The judge's sentencing remarks would reveal how the close Both young men had come to spending far longer behind bars, and why their youth saved them from a decade-long sentence.